Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Literacy View. Once again, we have a very special guest with us today. We're going to be talking about language. Now, this isn't your typical podcast about language. Usually, we talk about oral language in children. Today, we're going to be talking about teacher language. And you're going to learn a whole lot about why it's important and what you could be doing in your classroom if you're a teacher. If you're a parent, you're going to be picking up tips from our wonderful guest. And if you are a district administrator, well, listen up because you need to start making sure that some of this is being implemented in your building. All right. So today we have Dr. Jiang with us, and she is a postdoctoral scholar at Stanford Center on early childhood. She earned her PhD in education studies with a specialization in computational social science from the University of California in San Diego. And her research lies at the intersection of research methodology and early childhood education. Welcome, Yen. And your article that we are going to be discussing today is Does Teacher Talk Matter Too? A meta-analysis of partial correlations between teachers' language practices and children's language development from preschool to third grade. And we are so excited because both my co-host Judy Boxter and I, Faith Borkowski, have taught in the early childhood classroom. And Judy is a building coach K-2. I was an administrator for the Parent-Child Home Program and Early Reading First and a regional coach in Reading First. So we both have tons of experience in the early childhood world. And many of our listeners also care about early childhood. But even if you're a teacher in the upper grades, you are going to learn something important about language today. And you will not be disappointed. So to kick this off, Yen, I want to start off by the idea that I picked up from here is about quality language. Now, in my mind, from what I read from this study is it's very hard to determine what is quality language for a teacher. Why don't you start telling us a little bit about what that means? What does it mean, quality? How can we gauge what quality is?
Okay, thank you so much for having me. And I'm glad the first question you asked is about the concept of language quality and quantity. In the research field, when we're studying the language environment, language environment, and so the focus of this paper, teacher language practice, it is about their teachers' natural language using in classrooms. So it's like the daily interaction with children, language exchange. So it is nothing about the pedagogical strategies or the curriculum or their instructional activity. It's just as our conversation is how we talk in the daily basis. And when we're talking about language, we in the research field we usually distinguish into two dimensions. The first is language quantity, which is the number of words or number of sentences you're speaking, and the second is language quality. So actually, the concept of language quality is not universally agreed, even in the research field. So there are still a lot of debates of how we should think about language. What is actually quality language? What counts as high quality language? But it's in the research field, it's generally agreed that we can look at the language quality through three categories. So the first one is interactive. So think about like back and forth conversation with the children and your comments during the book reading, right? And you ask questions for the children. Just the strategies you use to keep the conversation going. So it's like the interactive. Oh, I cannot hear you.
Faith, you couldn't have done that earlier.
I did it again.
I can't believe it happened, and it's only been 5.2 minutes.
You know what? I'm listening, and I forget. So I wanted to stop you because you just said something so important. I want to make sure our listeners are picking up on this.
Mm-hmm.
So you talked about how quantity, the number of words, is something we know is important. Then you started to get into quality. And one of the benchmarks of quality is interactive exchange. And that is something that both Judy and I certainly know about. You talked about serve and return. We talked about this on one of our episodes. I think it was with Molly Ness. And, you know, I've known about this for a long time, but for our listeners, we want to make sure they're picking this up. So what does it mean, serve and return? The adult, you know, serves something up, and then we're waiting for a response. And then when the child says something, we want to jump on that and respond as well. This back and forth interactive exchange. Okay. So I just wanted to make sure we're all clear on that. Good. What are the other two dimensions of quality? Oh, you okay?
Yeah, sorry about that. The light just automatically turned off. Yeah. So the second dimension is linguistic features. Think about the diverse vocabulary you use. You use a set of diverse vocabulary, and you use advanced vocabulary or more sophisticated vocabulary, and how complex your syntax is. So you use more longer sentence and more complex syntactic structure. So those are the linguistic features. And the third dimension is conceptual features. Like if you use the language to explain complex concepts, like you explain what is magnet to children, and you explain the word meaning, what does certain word means. Those are all you're talking about the concept. Those are the content that is cognitively stimulating for children. So it's more about content, what you're actually saying. And also there is a decontextualized language. So what is that? It is when you are talking about past and future. So when you are not talking about the current things happening in the classroom, when you are asking children, what did you do during the weekend with your parents? Or if you're prompting questions to ask children to predict what will happen during the book reading. So that is talking about past and future. And when you engage in those contexts, you tend to use more complex language. And children also tend to engage in longer conversations, or they also tend to use more complex language to reply you to engage in that conversation. So that is the conceptual features. So although there is no universal agreement on what exactly language quality, but we tend to look at quality through these three aspects.
So to sum up, and then I'm going to jump to my co-host because I can't wait to hear what she has to say, because she's, working in early childhood, and this is going to be huge for everyone. All right. So we have the interactive feature, that back and forth of language, extending language. We used to call this peer. I don't know if we still use that, the prompt to evaluate, to extend, and then to repeat those, the peer acronym. At least that's what I was familiar with. But it's interactive. Then you mentioned also syntax and vocabulary, right? So vocabulary, the meaning, syntax is the order of words, right? Making sure a sentence makes sense. And then finally, the concept, right? Conceptual language, whether past, present, future, all that kind of stuff. All right, Judy Boxner, what are some of your thoughts about what Yen is talking about with quality language? She mentioned quantity as well. Do you have any thoughts about either one of those?
So I just want to say I have never seen on the Literacy View Faith as excited about a topic. I haven't seen you this excited in a long time. It's like Faith, it's a beautiful thing to see that a meta analysis was done, and we're speaking about it on the Literacy View to break it down so that we can make an impact on classrooms. When I saw this too, I was so excited to see the topic, because this summer I attended the Big Sky Literacy Summit, which was one of the best conferences I've ever attended, and the focus was language is everything. And a lot of it was also talking about how language is everything in relation to students. But I think what was so important was the additional reminder in this study about how important teacher language is in order to impact student outcomes. I think that is so key, because what I'm seeing in many classrooms is not enough time is spent on language for kids, because, so many people are now doing things at a brisk pace. And sometimes it's so brisk that they're not giving kids and the teacher enough time for a conversation. So, what is your recommendation to practitioners and teachers in the field so that we could, still continue to work at a brisk pace, because we know that's part of explicit instruction, but also make sure that we are prioritizing language in the classroom, which is something I'm so passionate about, because I could see that, if we don't have those conversations with kids and have impactful conversations, kids really are struggling with their language because we're not giving them decent practice. So, what are your suggestions for practitioners that are now being told brisk pace, get through this fast so that they get to their independent work?
That's a great question. Just had to throw that in.
Yeah, thank you very much for asking that. So actually, I think I know nowadays there's a lot on teachers' plate, right? So they are managing classrooms and there are different tasks, and they are doing a lot of things, and also they are facing a different generation of students. So now the generation is there is more access to the screen, and there is some also problematic screen time. So a lot of behavior issues happen in the preschool settings or classrooms. So that takes a lot of their energy to even just managing the class. So to me, I think maybe teachers' well-being should be prioritized, especially when you're thinking about their language use, daily language use, language exchange with children. So think about during COVID time when children were at home, and they have more time spending with parents, and we automatically think maybe so they have more time in interact with parents, so maybe more language exchange with parents. But what really happened is when they came back, and there's a lot of issues of language delay, right? So I think in terms of language exchange, especially it's a minute-to-minute interaction with children. When teachers are feeling burnout, and they're so busy with a lot of other things, it's really hard for them to get relaxed and to truly engage in a conversation with the children. So I think teachers' well-being should really be prioritized. And in terms of the engaging in high-quality language exchange with children, I think another thing is really important is for teachers to truly understand what is high quality language. So I know that in some of the teacher education programs or some professional development, in order to maximize the outcome, sometimes sometimes the concept has been simplified. Like I heard a lot from preschool teachers that quality language is just five exchange, 5 turns, 5 back and forth conversation. But I think quality language is much more than that. So there are the interactive aspect, and there is the linguistic aspect, and there is also the conceptual aspect. So
Can you give some examples maybe so that our viewers like will understand? Because some of these terms might be a little bit new for them. So let's like maybe go through them a little bit so that we understand like an example. I could be your student if you need. No, maybe Faith. Maybe Faith wants to be the student today. She loves it. Right, Faith? You're not muted, Faith.
I said, of course, of course.
Yeah, so let's give some examples of like, so say, we are practitioners. Give us some examples if you can of what those things that you just mentioned would look like and feel like and sound like.
Okay, so for example, interactive, right? It's like you use some strategies to facilitate children's engagement in dialogues. So there are like the basic strategy is asking questions. For example, if you're engaging in book reading, you in the process you stop and you ask the children questions, right? So just to initiate a conversation. So that is the back and forth conversation. Ask follow-up questions and comments on children's utterances. So when children give a response, you agree about that, so which can encourage the children to say more about that, right? And or echoing or building among the children's answers. For example, if the child said, "Oh, the child." So if you ask the child question, "What did you do during in the past weekend?" and the child said, "Oh, my mom took me to the ice cream," and you can say, "Oh, what kind of ice cream? Is that chocolate ice cream?" It's kind of building, so extend what the children has said, just to continue that conversation. And in terms of linguistic features, so those are how diverse your vocabulary. So, instead of using a simple bag of vocabulary, you try to use different vocabulary to describe a scenario, or when you're engaging in book reading, using diverse vocabularies, and also how complex your own sentence. So if you're
So Yen, can I stop you a second? So as I'm listening to this, if we wanted to use your example of an ice cream store, right? So perhaps it would be something like this. You have a book and there's an ice cream store. What's this? Simple question. The child might say, ice cream store. And so then you would evaluate it by saying, yes, it's an ice cream store. It's an ice cream store that's on the corner of, this street and that avenue. And look, the ice cream store has an awning on it. And you see people sitting under there because they want to be shaded while they eat the ice cream. So you start extending language. So it's the prompt, you evaluate, you extend, and then you encourage the child. So now what is this? Oh, it's an ice cream store that, sells this, this, and this, and it's here. So you want the child to then repeat after you. So you've modeled it, you've extended it, and then the child repeats. That's how I know of peer. But again, it could be done differently, but it's that throwing the prompt out and then evaluating, yes, this is what it is. Or if the child isn't correct, that's your time to adjust. And then you extend that language. And then finally, you want the child to be repeating so that they are then learning that language.
Can I jump in first? Oh, wait, you go first, and then I have a question related to what Faith just said.
Okay, yeah. So Faith, you're definitely a much, much better early childhood teacher than I am. And I think just now the example you gave it illustrates everything, the interactive feature. So you use some strategies, you ask questions, you expand on children's language, right? And to extend that conversation. So originally it might be just, where did you go? Oh, that's an ice cream store, and that's it. But you extended it into a longer, much longer conversation. Maybe it's 5 minutes. And then during the process, you also use a lot of words. You use a very diverse vocabulary, and some of them the child might know, and some of them child might not. But that's how the child learn different words through that conversation. And you also conceptually explain what is ice cream store, right? And maybe later you will even start to name the flavor of the ice cream. That also expand the children's vocabulary. So I think that example just perfectly illustrates all these three features.
Right. So by throwing out the word awning and explaining what an awning is, or if it's a flavor like pistachio, or, oh, look, it's green, that's pistachio, or anything like that. It's this interaction where you're using vocabulary and syntax and trying to extend language. Judy, do you have any other questions?
I wanted to jump in. So this relates very closely with a lot of the things that I heard at the Big Sky Literacy Summit over the summer. And there was a speaker, Julie Van Dyke, and her team, and they talked about how important syntax is and how important it is to, really expand that language and look at the parts of that language. And one thing that, I've been doing in the field based on feedback that I've been getting from other practitioners and visitors is sentence expansion. Just simply like, I went to the store to get ice cream. You could throw in a prompt, when, and then a child could get deeper into speaking about it, throwing in those, or who, or, simply like if a kid says a sentence and adding who, where, when, how. And obviously, we're speaking about oral language, but what's very helpful that I see for kids is also taking it to the next level. We did it verbally, and when you can, let's also expand our sentences by writing it and speaking it, because we know the research shows how much we should connect, especially as kids get older, oral language now connected to written language, because, how do we get more complex? But I think this is one of the things that I am fearful of, in the States now, there's been such a push for, different things inside of literacy blocks. And I think a lot of it is squishing or squeezing things in rather than really giving each area the attention it deserves. And one thing that I think is happening less, unfortunately, even though the science of reading advocates are screaming it's important, is read alouds. And when you have read alouds in the classroom, which I am a big fan of, and I know the research says how important they are, they're not happening as much. I'm seeing a lot of reading of little short excerpts, which we know have a purpose too. But how do we make sure that we prioritize these conversations if we're giving kids less chance to listen to a good old fashioned read aloud and, having those deeper conversations?
So, Yen, jumping on what Judy said, she wants a suggestion for how do we then move this ahead if teachers are feeling like we have to get the core book in. I don't have time for a read aloud, or I don't have time. I mean, how do we get the message across how important this is, that this is not something to be cut from the day?
Yeah, so I think that there is a conceptual distinction. So read aloud, I think is actually not considered as in this study as the natural language practices with children. So it's more like a conversation. So how teachers are talking daily with the language exchange with children. But I certainly agree upon the importance of read aloud. And I think based on different cultural contexts, people people value certain aspects of activities or language use. Like in China, it's all day read aloud. So there's a lot of read aloud. Children read aloud together. This activity is valued, but I know nowadays, like Judy said, the time of read aloud has been squished by other activities in the classroom. Yeah.
So I have a question for you, Yen, about the research. And
Wait, Faith, can we take a step back for a second? I'm processing what Yen just said in relation to what I was saying, just for 2 seconds. So that's actually gave me some hope that even if, you don't get as much time to do certain things, you could still maximize oral language despite, even if you don't have times that for all those read alouds, you could still make a big impact with language throughout your literacy block. So it's more about what you're saying throughout the day. So it could be simple conversations and different things like that. It doesn't have to just be academic rigor. It could just be, am I understanding correctly?
Yes, you understand correctly. So it's more about so if we say that a child spend 8 hours in the classroom per day, right? So it's more about what teachers say during the whole 8 hours. So it's less about, okay, what did the teachers say during that 10 minutes reading session. So it's more about the whole day, which makes it promising, but it also make any intervention hard because it's throughout the day. It's not just 10 minutes, 30 minutes, certain the language instruction or circle time. So it's throughout the day.
So I want to jump into the study for a minute because I think this is really important. You there? Okay.
That's funny.
All right. So it said in the study that young children might filter out input that is too complex. All right. So what I was reading from that study, it seems as though if a child might have weak language skills, whether it's because they're from a low SES, or let's say English is not the first language. For those children, they could be overwhelmed by too much complicated language. And that from the study, it seemed like, but once children get past that barrier of, being able to understand basic language, that's when the teacher quality language really is very important. Am I understanding that correctly? That for young children, kids who might come from homes that are not language rich, or English is not their first language, that it's more important for them to have basic language skills built up. And then for the kids who already have basic language skills, that's when the quality language really takes off. But for those other kids, quantity is probably more important, just hearing basic words again and again. Was I reading the study correctly?
Yeah, I think almost there. But you
please help me along.
All right, come on. We want to give Faith a sticker for her sticker chart.
But I think you really raise a very, very important question. And that is also one of the key message I want to pass through this study. So when we're talking about language quality, there is an assumption that teachers should use more complex language, longer sentences, more diverse vocabularies, and that can connect to children's language development, right? So I evaluated more than 100 studies, and I think roughly 1/4 of the study actually shows a negative correlation. Is that when teachers use more complex language, the children actually it's not gaining the language skills as expected. So, as you just said, that is one study just to hypothesize that maybe when children's language skill is not there yet, and you use too complex language, and children actually filter out the message, so they actually didn't get your input. So thinking about if you explain a concept to a preschooler using a university professor language, right? So the children actually didn't get anything. So that prompts me to rethink about the concept of language quality. What is exactly high quality language? I think language quality only taking into consideration of the teacher, but not taking consideration of the children. I think it might not be complete, right? And so while teachers are using high quality language, I think it's also very important for them to meet where children are and adapt their language use to the children's language development. So I think.
So I want to give you a cheers for that, Deb, because let's repeat just what you said. It's important to take into consideration the child's language, right? So we
Yes.
have to think about who's in front of us. Big cheers for you. And Judy, of course, does not have her cheers button because she doesn't have batteries in it.
No, I have batteries, but I don't know where it is right now. I'll find it. Listen, I'm in the middle of reading Leslie Lord's book on executive functioning. Don't worry.
Maybe you can get some tips.
This is very interesting. So I have a question. So I'll actually give an example. So today I was working on a lesson. I was modeling for my team. And the students in front of me, I wanted to make sure that they understood opposites. The opposites in a book. And it was a concept. It's funny because when I was little, I knew opposites. And these kids, they really did not. So I started modeling my lesson, giving examples and asking, but they seem to have gotten it better when I was doing acting and physical gestures. Is there any thing in that study that relates to physical motions? Because I wasn't only speaking, I had like the word was yummy, and then I did yucky. The word was hot, and then I had a model cold because I saw they weren't getting it. So is there anything in the study that talks about, physically modeling as well as verbally?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important point. And for this very specific study, and for the more than actually the study is starting from 14,000 articles. So I screened 14,000 articles. So for that many articles, I think I didn't I didn't see one that is studying the gestures. So like you said, the gestures, right? But gestures has been included in research when researchers are studying language, but I think it's more in the family context. So at home, how parents using the combination of gestures and their actually verbal language, and that how that together impact children's language development. But unfortunately, in the context of classroom, I haven't seen anything like that. But it doesn't mean that it does
That's
not
so
exist.
interesting because I was talking and talking, and then they weren't getting it. And the second I involved gestures, all of a sudden, boom, it's like a light bulb went on and it clicked for some of the kids.
Yes, and I think you just the example you gave is also your explaining concept, right? And it also has something to do with teaching. But here, I think here we were talking more about natural language use.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Faith, I'm sure you've modeled stuff like that too, like for directional positions. I was in front of the chair, I was in back of the chair, and that was, there was a rich language experience. But when I saw, and like you mentioned, Faith, sometimes the listeners weren't getting it. I had to go into plan B mode and think about, okay, how can I extend that language experience so that, it came to life. It's not always easy, right? All of our learners in front of us, their language experiences are very different.
Which brings me to the question about parents. So, is there something in your work, Yen, where you looked at parents' language and language in the home, in addition to teacher language? Is there something where there could be a collaboration between parents and teachers so that it's extended at home? Because I could tell you, when I was the project manager for Early Reading First, we tried to do that. Whatever training we gave to the teachers, we were trying to bring parents in as well, so that when they would go home, there would be an extension of what we were doing in school, especially the population. These kids were in Head Start, so we wanted to make sure that they were getting rich experiences, in school as well as outside of school. Is there anything in your studies that show that?
So anything in my study, I didn't see that impact, but I think that is a line of research. So let's combine these two contexts. So because there's also a lot of rich amount of research that studies parents' language, right? So teacher language in the classroom is kind of like an extension of the line of study on parental language use. But at the same time, it's also, if you want to study the two contexts at the same time, it's also very hard, thinking about the resources, and then you not only recruit teacher, and then you recruit families. So I think I'm sure there are studies out there that look at these two contexts together. But so in my study, there is no such studies like that.
Okay, I just wanted to know if there was, because I didn't see that in this particular study. I just wanted to know if that was something. And then my other question was, you talked about quantity and quality, right? So there's an expression I'm sure you heard with clothing. Oh, it's much better to have quality clothes than have just a lot of clothes that are not made very well, right? So it's always like, oh, quantity versus quality. Is that with language? Is there quantity versus quality, or they're equally important? Like, is there one more important than the other, or are they equally important?
So I think in my study, it's also a debate in the research field, quantity versus quality. And I believe this line of research starts with quantity. So I bet you all heard about the 30 million word gap, that study, right? But I think over the years, and there is actually a meta-analysis on parental language use and children's language development. And the finding is pretty similar to mine. So their finding is language quality might be more important than quantity in terms of children's language development. So in my finding, it's also, I find a significant relationship between language quality and children's language development, but I didn't find a significant relationship between language quantity and children's language development. But there is a caveat here. I think there's less than 10 study who actually measured the language quantity. So because there is much smaller amount of study focusing on that, so I think the readers should be more cautious interpreting. So I'm not saying language quantity is not important at all, and I think it also varies by children's age and their language ability. So how quantity and quality play in that in children's development vary by these factors. So I think there is no strict answer of which one is more important. It depends on children's age and their language ability.
Let me ask something. So, say you're a teacher in the field, which which I am, I've been an educator for a very long time and a coach. How would I be able to assess myself to know that I'm providing students with quality language? Like how as a teacher can I monitor the quality of my language, like in a simple way? Like, what if a teacher doesn't have time, unfortunately, to go home and read your whole study and interpret it, because, teachers aren't always pros at interpreting research. From a practical point of view, how would I, as a practitioner, make sure that the quality of my language was as efficient and excellent as possible? What would I do?
So that is a very good question. And I think the first step might be even to understand what really high quality language is, right? So we talk about these three features. And I think teacher can engage in a reflective process to thinking back of what they have said, to try to. So if you're doing the teacher preparation for the circle time, and try to think more words to use, more diverse vocabulary, or try to just like the face example of the ice cream shop and try to model that. Yeah, and I think it's a reflective process. And also, because how we use language is also based on how we learn language, right? So language acquisition is it's through socialization. So how we use language is influenced by our past, maybe 30 years experience, is our childhood and our teachers. So that is also one point of that study I mentioned. So there's a lot of intervention that might not generate the outcome as expected. So they try to enhance teachers' language quality, but it's not as expected. So I personally think, because we also learn to use language through socialization, and maybe it's like 30 or 40 years, it's really hard to change your use of language after one day or one training session, right? So I think so the intervention in the future, I think, probably needs to be longitudinal. So think about prolonged intervention and more frequent sessions. So not just I come here 30 minutes and show you what is quality language, and then tomorrow you can use very high quality language. So I
No,
personally
of course
think,
it's going to take time. But what would be helpful for, I think, a lot of teachers is like a tool that they could refer to and read back, or a checklist or something to ensure that they're starting to use that language more efficiently, or reminders. Like sometimes, like just reading a study, it won't, for me, it wouldn't transfer. Like, how do you make sure? Faith, like, remember back in the day, I mean, this is probably out of style, but like with Bloom's taxonomy, we had our reference tool. We kept looking at our tool to make sure that I would make like little cards to make sure that I was asking higher order questions in my classroom. So, like, are there any tools visually at this point that would support this that you know of, or no?
As far as I know, I'm not aware of such kind
Okay.
of tool. Yeah, especially coming out from this particular study. But I
Okay.
think that's a really good point, and I have never thought about this. So maybe next
Maybe
time when I
tonight
come,
you thought about it, and then you can
yeah.
get back to us, because I think that's what we're so passionate about on the Literacy View. So many studies come out, and how do we make sure? Because we have so much gratitude for the researchers, right? This is work that Faith and I don't want to do, right? It's not our specialty. Our specialty is helping our listeners and us ourselves, of how do we bring that work into the classroom. And that bridge to practice is something we're so passionate about, and it's not always that easy, right, Faith?
No, but I do think acronyms help. So I mentioned peer before, right? PEER. So if you think, okay, I'm going to start off with a prompt, I'm going to evaluate, I'm going to then extend language once my student says something, I'm going to be really cognizant of trying to extend language, and then I'm going to try to get those kids to repeat. Going through the acronym helps. There's another acronym that's also very helpful called CROWD.
Faith, let me stop you for a second. I think what's going to end up happening, I'm going to hold Faith accountable. We have a newsletter called the No BS Bestie Press, and Faith is going to remember all these things. And guess what? Very soon, we'll put some of these resources and tips into the newsletter, Faith.
Well, actually, the peer is in my book, my If Only I Would Have Known book. So I have it there.
Great.
I talk about this. So
Great.
if anybody is interested in my books, I do talk about language in my books as well. But CROWD is something that's really helpful as well. So if you think of the acronym CROWD, right, there is putting out something where there's a completion of a thought, where you're expecting the child to complete a thought. So it's almost like a fill in the blank type of statement.
So let's do an example. Let's do it here on, let's do it on the Literacy View.
So something like you're pointing to a picture. The children went to the ice cream store, you know what I mean? But you're leaving that out, right? Then R would be recall, like, oh, so what do you remember about this? And so you're getting kids to talk about something to bring it back. So the recall. O is open-ended. So the answer is not just going to be only one response. It could be multiple responses, an open-ended question. Then W stands for like the 5 W's. Judy, before you mention, like,
I'm obsessed with those 5 W's. Absolutely.
Right. And then D is distancing, where you bring up something like, let's say you're a teacher and you went on a class trip a few months ago. Oh, do you remember when we went to the planetarium and we stopped off at that little kiosk? Oh, that's another word for a stand, or something of that effect. But you're bringing in something that happened a while ago, but bringing it back.
And I think, Faith, it ties in with some explicit vocabulary instruction that I've been doing in the classrooms because I'm working with some people as well. I think that's great, but I think it also helps with eliciting student responses, because I think, like, in classrooms, very often we assume that kids don't know what a word means. And like a lot of these programs, yes, I'm using the word programs, come because that's a famous one on the Literacy View. We know the difference between programs and curriculums. A lot of these programs, like, they'll give words and they'll show this boring definition, and they don't even connect it to how it's going to help you in the story that you're about to read or in the text that you're about to read. So, my team and I, we have been working really hard to not just assume that, not to just give like this boring definition, and make vocabulary like like an experience. Like, have you ever? And then boom, maybe some kids have had an experience with that word. Like, have you ever heard a firecracker? Rather than saying a firecracker is, and those kind of conversations has been really helping our students, because sometimes we'll assume, that kids don't know the language, but there may be kids in the class that did have an experience with something. And that's how I think is a creative and useful way of expanding oral language in our classrooms, rather than this word means this word means that, and just telling and telling and telling, rather than honoring that our students do come with so much knowledge. And I'll give an example. One of the schools where I coach is one of the poorest schools in the city. And guess what? Those kids have many of their own experiences. And sometimes the experiences that kids will share will be so unique and so rich. I think I might have talked about this once on the Literacy View. We were doing something with a book, and it was about log cabins. And I'm like, oh my gosh, log cabins. And it was talking about Abraham Lincoln from a long time ago. And I wasn't sure if the kids knew, but then I mentioned, you know, log cabin, and the teacher translated what a log cabin means. And kids were telling us about log cabins in the Dominican Republic and how they stayed in a cabin, and the whole experience changed. And I think it's important to honor that our kids come to the classrooms with language, and how do we take that language to a different experience. But once again, the thing that I worry about is this brisk pace, which is important because we want to get to kids to get through the I do, we do, you do, but how do we still maximize and have those conversations?
Can I press the cheers button here? I wish I have one.
What cheers, Judy.
Yeah, I
I'm
think
glad that Faith always has her cheers button. She always has her BS button. I'm just trying to get through the day. I was telling Yin, I just got back from China about a week ago, and I'm still adjusting to the time difference. It's funny, you know, Faith texted me right before the recording. She's like, "Are you sleeping?" And I lied. I lied to my co-host and said no, but I did take a power nap. It's been a rough ride coming back from China and
I
going
know
back
you
to
very
work.
well. I
That's
know you very
scary.
well. I knew that you were going to be sleeping right before this.
I had a little migraine. Yes, I went out to eat. That was the true part. But then I did take a little power nap so I could be fresh for the literacy view. See that beautiful discussion? We just practiced language, Faith. Wait,
yeah,
ask
and
me. Faith, help me expand on my sentence. I took a little nap.
Did you take a nice, deep, restful nap? Or was it quick and not an enjoyable nap?
It was so enjoyable. I didn't even know what planet I was on.
Yen, do you have any tips for our teachers out there working with older students? So we talked about younger students. Could some of these strategies that we just talked about, keeping in mind that there are a lot of teachers working with older students where the students' English is not the first language, or they do not have homes where there's a lot of language, what can they take away from this discussion?
yeah, so actually the one of the result is when if the children are older, they actually is the relationship is stronger. So if the children are older, teachers higher quality language is related to higher language development of their language skill. So I think so when we're talking about this language environment, we usually think, okay, for older kids, maybe that doesn't matter that much, right? But the results shows quite the opposite. So even when the kids are older, your language quality matters. And I think just now, Judy gave us a very, very good example of incorporating the lived experience of the students. And there is also research showing that when you're incorporating students' lived experience in the conversation, that actually leads to more language development on their end. And also, like you said, nowadays the classrooms are very diverse, right? The students are coming from different backgrounds and they have different levels of language ability. So which tie to another. So the concept we just talked about. It's very important for the teachers to meet where students are. So it's not just let me use the more complex language, longer sentences. And so when the children are just beginning to grasp language, some simple sentence, repetitive language, simple vocabulary might be even more helpful. So
I'm
I
going to
think
repeat just what you said because I want to just pause and make sure
Faith
everything.
is about to get wild again. Here she goes.
I think that is so important.
I'm saying
So,
that it's important. I'm excited that you're getting so excited.
yeah, so I think we have to stop. We have to know the kids in front of us. And then if they don't have strong language skills, complex language is going to go right over their heads, right? It's just too much. We have to really dial it back, know who's in front of us. And that's when we would use basic language, repetitive language, so that they hear that basic language again and again, so they could at least have some foundational language to work with before we start adding in that complex layer of language. Is that correct?
Yes, that exactly.
Good. I have something to add to that. So I think another thing that's really important from reading this study, it reaffirmed some of the stuff that I think really helps kids. Is, so a lot of kids very often in a lot of classrooms will give one word responses. Faith, you've heard one word responses, right? When kids give one word responses, as a practitioner, I always give feedback of how can we turn that into a complete sentence. And if one, like it in the lesson that I was modeling today, kids were giving one word answers. I helped them to speak in a complete sentence, and then we practiced as an entire group who I knew language was still a little bit difficult for. We all said the sentence together, even chorally, as an additional form of practice. So I think classroom teachers, just remember, instead of those one word responses, let's get those kids speaking in complete sentences. What do you think, Faith?
Yeah, and that's where peer, and I'll keep going back to that. That's where that peer acronym helps. So, Judy, that one word answer would then be something that you prompted. The child gave you a one word answer, but that's when you evaluate. Is it at least a right answer, a wrong answer? You acknowledge it, but then you're trying to extend that response.
Yep.
And then you want them to repeat, and that was your choral language. So
Yeah,
even
and it was nice to hear instead of just one kid talking, sometimes having the whole group talking and having that whole discussion. I really felt that doing that also helped a lot with reading comprehension and understanding a story so much better because of that language experience.
Yen, this was such a pleasure having you with us today. It was fantastic. I just want to make sure our audience walks away with all this great information. So, is there anything you'd like to add that Judy and I did not ask that you feel is important for the audience to know?
Yeah, so I think we covered everything, and actually I learned a lot from both of you. And I always feel during research we need to incorporate teachers their experiences, right? I think you're the expert in the classroom. So I always think we need to listen to the teachers, listen to the educators, practitioners, what they are thinking about on this particular question. And next time I will do a better job. I will develop a tool with acronyms to
Oh, yay! Oh my God. Yeah, and can you promise us one thing? When you develop the tool, can you come to the Literacy View first? We're very easy to contact. We'll really appreciate the tool, and I think all of our listeners, because we have a very large body of teachers and parents, we would love that tool. I'm sorry we gave you homework on the Literacy View. Faith, I
yeah,
think
for
we gave.
sure.
Okay, great, 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 great. Faith, you have to do your traditional thing. It has to happen.
All right, Yen, I know this might throw you a little bit.
You could do less.
Okay, but do you have anything you want to call BS on in education? You know what I mean by this. There's a lot of BS out there, anything to do with language that it's a myth, it's not true. Anything you want to call BS on, and I'll press the button for you. Go ahead.
Yeah, so yeah, another point is I really want educators to know that research is not conclusive. So sometimes when educators and practitioner policymaker when they approach research, maybe they tend to think, okay, this one study said that, okay, so that is a true answer of this whole question, but it's hardly the case. Thinking about evaluated more than 100 studies, and in that 100 study, there are positive outcome, there are negative outcome. So it's really hard for one study to say to provide a conclusive answer to a single question. So if somebody said, okay, this study said that, so I will do this in my classroom, and not thinking about the children in that classroom, so I will push that BS button to
Oh,
that.
wow, Faith, do it. Do it.
Okay, so for all of you who think that one study is going to be the end all, that is BS. All right, so that's why Judy and I value when we have people on here who will discuss a meta-analysis.
Oh,
right?
my God, we're so appreciative.
Right, you're taking so many studies that you looked at and pointing to what seems to be, at this moment in time, what would be best practice, right? So it doesn't mean that it's the end all, but after looking at a number of studies, we have to do something. So at least we try to do that something that makes the most sense at this time.
All right, now, Faith's next thing. We can't end the literacy view without the next thing.
And then, Yen, this is it, I promise. Is there
Maybe she likes this part. Maybe this is Yen's favorite part. You don't know.
something you want to give a big cheers to, besides Judy, but something in education that you want to cheer about, something in your study, something you found, something that you feel that we're on the right track in with language. And I'll cheer for you.
Of course, I want to cheers to all the educators, the practitioners in the field, in the classroom. So you're the one who is actually using that language in the daily 8-hour basis to communicating that all the information to the children. And yeah, this is really incredible, and nothing can happen without all of you, the educators and practitioners.
So we're going to give a big cheers to our teachers out there, and we're going to cheer for ourselves. Yay.
Wow, Faith, I don't think I've ever seen you on the literacy view cheer for yourself. Congratulations tonight, Faith.
I know. Thank you.
You know what? Faith has put in her time in education. She certainly deserves a good old cheer. Thank you, Yan.
Yen, thank you so much. Best of luck to you in your new position. Congratulations. And we hope to hear more from you. We look forward to more of your research, and you're welcome to come back. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and good night.
Thank you. Good night.